We all love the new Porsche 911, the latest sports car from one of the world's best car manufacturers. But this film isn't about the 911.
Porsche's reliance on what was essentially one model nearly bankrupted them back in the day. So we're here to celebrate the supporting cast of the 911, water-cooled cars from the 70s, 80s and 90s that kept Porsche in the business of producing the air-cooled ones that we all know and love.
And it starts here. This is a Porsche 924, but it was so nearly born a Volkswagen. See, there was a collaboration between Porsche and Volkswagen. Volkswagen wanted something spunky to take them up market, and Porsche wanted a more mass market car to increase sales. And the 924 was born. Launched in 1975, it was a huge success.
The 924 was powered by a redesigned Audi engine with a Porsche designed head, so it's not just a part-spin van engine, despite what internet ballbags might tell you. It is fairly modestly powered though, 125 bhp for early European models and American cars having as little as 90 horsepower from a water-cooled 4-cylinder engine. Quite a different design to the 911 and built to a budget, but they only weigh 1,000 kilos. They're also robust and handle really, really well. In '78, Porsche used their experience with forced induction to give the 924 more oomph. The 924 Turbo was good for 170 bhp and performance was almost on a par with the contemporary 911 SC.
I want to stick my neck out now. I think it's easier to have fun in a cheap old 924 like this than get precious with your 911. Let's try it. So in 1982, Porsche launched the successor to this model, the 944, but the 924 wasn't dead yet. They took the engine from the 944 and dropped it into a 924 body shell, and they called it the 924S, and that's what this is. Now this car is actually slightly quicker than the 944 of the same spec because it's a little bit lighter and it's got that slightly slipperier shape. The reason I absolutely love these is that they're relatively cheap to buy, cheap to run, and they're really robust. They make great track cars. The interesting thing about how these cars drive is that they make you feel like you're absolutely at the center of the car. You've got the transaxle sitting behind you, the engine slightly in front of you here, and it just feels so well balanced. Everything seems to pivot around you. This car isn't quite a standard 924S. It's got some race seats, most of the gubbins in the back has been removed, suspension has been stiffened at the back and softened at the front, and it can be chucked around with quite a degree of confidence. But remember, these cars have no traction control, no airbags, and you're pretty much on your own if something goes wrong. That just makes you feel even more connected. So the various special models of the 924, but the basic model remained in production until 1988. They'd made over 150,000 of these. It was a great success for Volkswagen and a huge success, of course, for Porsche. Douglas Adams once said that taking a Porsche into London is like taking a Ming vase to a football game. But he must have been talking about a 911 because this 924, I'd take it anywhere, on track, in town, anywhere.
Despite the really impressive sales figures of the 924 in the late 70s, there was always this large bunch of grumbling Porsche purists that felt that the humble performance and modest VW origins of the 924 meant that it wasn't really a proper Porsche. Well, Porsche's top brass knew that they had a great little platform in the 924, but it lacked a bit of motorsport kudos, and it certainly could have done with a bit more oomph. So in the early 80s, they decided to homologate the 924 and take it racing, and thus was born the Carrera GT. The one that went to Le Mans, they actually pumped up to 320 brake horsepower, and it did pretty well. It battled from the back right up to 6th place. So the aggressive new looks of that 924 race car at Le Mans came the inspiration for the 944. This was the right car for the right time. This car wasn't aimed at traditional Porsche 911 drivers. Oh no, they were still having way too much fun in the 1980s, going through shop windows backwards on fire. This car was aimed at a new breed of cash-rich young urban professionals, and it sold in its masses. So even though the 944 never got the V6 that it was rumoured to be getting, it got a very nice Porsche-built 2.5 litre 4-pot that gave about 163 brake horsepower, was good for 137 miles per hour, and can hit 60 into the shade over 8 seconds. A healthy bank balance meant that the Porsche engineers now were able to tinker with the 944 platform. So they played around with 16 valve heads, they played around with forced induction, displacement went up to 2.7 and eventually 3 litre. But the cream of the crop, the most highly prized of all 944s, is this one. Now this is a 1988 Turbo S, which had 250 brake horsepower thanks to a slightly larger turbocharger and a bit of clever engine mapping. It had Coney adjustable suspension, an uprated clutch, a limited slip diff, but it was also the same price as an entry-level 911. They didn't sell in huge numbers, as you can imagine. Most yuppies plumped for a Bogo 911 instead. So you had to be a pretty keen driver wanting the ultimate Porsche really, the ultimate balanced package, and something that was a little bit exclusive as well. Only 1,000 Porsche Turbo S were made, and only 77 of those made its way over to the UK. This is a particularly rare car because most of them were painted a god-awful silver pink. This one is in a very nice Zermatt silver. But this car isn't a standard Turbo S. It's been much loved over the years and heavily fettled. It now has 300 brake horsepower and all manner of engine trickery, and it is just absolutely brilliant. It is flat, it is planted, it is balanced, and even though this track is a little bit greasy, it is just a fabulous little car. Oh, and it does come on boost. He did warn me about that.
So towards the end of its production, Porsche planned to facelift the 944 S2 with a model called the 944 S3. But they got a bit carried away and they created this. This car has 80% new content. They took production away from the Volkswagen factory at Neckarsulm, moved it back to Porsche's HQ at Zuffenhausen, and they called it the 968. Now I love these cars, and I love these cars so much, I bought one. This one, actually. This is my daily driver.
It has a 6-speed gearbox, uprated suspension, and those sharky headlamps. It was voted the best handling car of the year by Performance Car magazine, and even today takes some keeping up with. I love the cool details. The spare tyre comes with a compressor, there's a simple lap timer in the dash, and there's a flap over the filler cap to remind you to check your oil. It has that faint smell of machinery about it, and every time you get in, it seems to say, "Race me," but in German.
Now, like all German cars of the 80s and 90s, it's really geared for high-end speeds, so it isn't a lot of fun to pot around at low speeds, and you can hear there's a rather irritating rattle from the dashboard. I don't know if the mic will pick that up. What else don't I like? Nothing. Actually, I love this car. So classic Porsches are all a fairly good investment, but I don't think they should be bought and stored away in a garage. I love the fact that I can drive this thing every day. I've taken it to France, I've done some rallies in it, I've done the Nürburgring like everybody really should, and it's been flawless, absolutely flawless. It's got a very interesting engine. It's got the most powerful, naturally aspirated 4-cylinder 3-litre engine in the world, or it was at time of production. That gives me about 240 horsepower, and it redlines at 6,200 RPM. There was a lot of engine development work done on this model too. For example, it was the first model in the lineup to get variable valve timing, so actually not a lot happens when you're pottering around. When you really start to rev the balls off of the thing, it really flies. A bit like this. You can feel how this is related to the 924. You feel like you're sitting in the middle of the action. It's pretty noisy. You can smell machinery. You know what's going on. And whilst it might look like quite a modern, funky looking coupe from the outside, inside it's still got that black plastic vinyl that you see in all old Porsches, and it's fairly basic. But you know what? I love that.
So that's the other Porsches, the front-engine coupes that saved Porsche and the 911 that we all know and love. But there is one more character in this tale, but not one that was intended to save our beloved 911, but one that was actually supposed to kill it off. The original 911 of 1963 was an evolution of the rear-engine Porsche 356, which in turn had evolved from the humble VW Beetle. Now, it was a fabulous bit of engineering, but sales of the quirky little driver's car had started to stall by the late 60s. And engineers felt that they'd exhausted the platform's potential. The top brass agreed that a modern replacement was needed. By 1971, the 928 was on the drawing board. This time, Porsche's new flagship would have mass appeal. It'd have sharp but predictable handling, more power, more space, and more creature comforts befitting of a Grand Tourer rather than an out-and-out sports car. The 928 was an absolute triumph of design, and it won a lot of fans. It was very futuristic styling for its day. And in 1978, 1 year after its launch, it actually won the very prestigious European Car of the Year award. In fact, to date, I think it's the only sports car that's ever won that. They said they were going to use the 928 to replace the 911 in 1981. That was put back to 1985, and eventually they never phased it out. It was kept at the top of the Porsche lineup, above the 911, if not in the hearts of 911 fanatics. A bit like the Panamera does today. It's got a lot more poke than contemporary 911s, and it employed that same trick of getting 50-50 weight distribution by putting the gearbox at the back. One interesting fact about the 928 is that it can out-sprint every single contemporary 911 from its production run rears from 1977 to 1995, with the exception of the uber-expensive Porsche 911 Turbo, the 964. The 928 was built for the Autobahns rather than the Nürburgring. It's a very long-legged, comfortable GT car. And it was bought by discerning executives across the world. It was bought by Hollywood A-listers like Julia Roberts, Tom Selleck. It was even driven by despotic leaders like the Shah of Iran. In fact, it's even rumoured that North Korea's dear leader, Kim Jong-il, used to enjoy a blast around Pyongyang in his own personal car. And even design gurus like Steve Jobs were inspired by the 928. See, originally the first Macintosh prototype was quite an angular, boxy, as he described it, Ferrari-esque sort of shape. And he wanted his design to be more timeless, to be more curvaceous, more Porsche, as he said at the time. And that's why the Apple Mac looks like it does today. Well, of course, in '95, they finally pulled the plug on the 928 and the 968, and that was the end of this transaxled family, wasn't it? And they went on and produced the Boxster and the Cayman and that that big SUV thing.
The big fat thing we're trying not to be rude about. That's the Cayenne, and the Cayenne, of course, is Porsche's biggest seller. Who'd have thought they were ever going to make those from when they started out from this? No. And things go full circle. I know I'm biased, but I really, really love the 968. It's my daily driver. It's reliable, it's fun, it's everything I want in a modern classic. I think it's a great car. What's your favourite?
Ooh. Well, you know I always root for the underdog, and my dad had one of these when I was a lad, so I've always got a soft spot for the 924. It absolutely kills me to say it, but I do like your 968. I think it is a fab car, but I think quite a canny buy now, because 911 prices are going stratospheric, is probably the 928, an early 70s one before they put all that aero gubbins on it. I think would be a pretty canny buy, so that would be my pick.
Yeah, I'd like a 928 as well. Manual gearbox and that mad Pasha trim that makes your eyeball go strange.
That's the one.
Yeah, great cars, one and all.
Of course, Porsche make about €2 billion profit a year now, but if it hadn't have been for these water-pumping coupes from the 70s, 80s and 90s, they probably wouldn't be in business today. And I think there's probably armies of car fans out there are rather grateful for that.